Welcome to my channel, The Historic State. The soldier's code is clear. Duty, honor, country. It's about loyalty to your brothers in arms, obedience to command, and the unyielding commitment to your nation's cause. But what happens when that cause becomes morally corrupt? What happens when the line between right and wrong blurs in the fog of war, and the very men you fight alongside cross into unthinkable depravity? Today, we tell the harrowing, almost unbearable true story of a soldier who faced this ultimate moral dilemma. He was a decorated warrior, a leader loved by his men. But when confronted with unspeakable war crimes committed by his own comrades, he chose a path of solitary, agonizing defiance. He risked court-martial, his life, and the hatred of his fellow soldiers, all for the sake of his conscience. This is the story of Sergeant Michael Mack Carter, the man who chose humanity over loyalty and paid a price that echoes through history. NTHE year is 1969. The war in Vietnam rages, a brutal, unforgiving conflict that is tearing apart not just a nation, but the very fabric of those who fight it. Sergeant Michael Mack Carter was an exemplary soldier, a natural leader who had seen more combat than men twice his age. He was respected by his superiors, adored by his men. He was the kind of NCO, non-commissioned officer, who led from the front, always looking out for his squad, always putting their lives before his own. He believed in the mission, he believed in his country, and he believed in the inherent goodness of his fellow soldiers. But the relentless grind of combat, the constant fear, the brutal heat, and the slow, insidious erosion of morale were beginning to twist some men, turning them into something monstrous. Mack was starting to see cracks in the foundation. Small acts of cruelty escalating, disturbing incidents being swept under the rug. An unsettling feeling began to gnaw at his conscience. Nen Mac had joined the army with a strong sense of duty, instilled by a father who had fought in Korea. He believed in honor, in the strict rules of engagement, in the moral code that separated soldiers from savages. He'd sat through countless briefings on the Geneva Conventions, on the protection of non-combatants, on the sacred principles of humanity even amidst the inhumanity of war. A true soldier, his drill sergeant had barked, knows the difference between an enemy combatant and an innocent civilian. Mack had taken those words to heart, believing them to be the bedrock of his service. He was a soldier, not a murderer, and he expected the same from his comrades. NNBUT, the reality of Vietnam was far removed from the pristine ideals of training. The enemy was elusive, often indistinguishable from the civilian population. Every shadow could hide a threat, every villager a potential enemy. Frustration, fear, and a burning desire for revenge began to fester. Mack started noticing small, unsettling incidents. A village ransacked after a firefight, civilians treated with unnecessary brutality, a growing callousness towards human life. He tried to speak to his lieutenant, Lieutenant Barnes, a man whose own moral compass seemed increasingly broken by the war. Barnes, jaded and cynical, simply waved him off. "This is war, Mac," he'd grumble. "Don't be naive, we do what we have to do. Keep your head down." Mac felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The line was blurring, and no one seemed to care. NTHE's situation exploded during a particularly brutal search and destroy mission in a remote village, suspected of harboring Viet Cong. A sudden, vicious ambush claimed several American lives, including one of Mac's closest friends. Rage, grief, and a thirst for immediate, unthinking vengeance swept through the remaining soldiers. In the ensuing chaos, while Mac was tending to the wounded, he saw it. A group of his own men, led by the volatile Private Stevens, were herding unarmed villagers, mostly women and elderly men, into a small hut. Stevens, his eyes burning with a terrifying cold fury, raised his rifle. Mac froze. He saw the unimaginable happening before his very eyes. The Geneva Conventions, the rules of engagement, his own moral code, all of it screamed in his head. "No!" Mac roared, dropping his medical kit, his voice tearing through the chaotic air. He ran, desperate to intervene, to stop the atrocity that was unfolding. He was too late. Stevens fired, and the world, for Sergeant Michael Carter, shattered. The image, seared into his memory, would haunt Mac forever. He physically tackled Stevens, pulling him away, a raw, primal scream tearing from his throat. The other soldiers, stunned by Mac's intervention, stared. Some were shocked, others glared at Mac, enraged that he had interfered with their justice. Lieutenant Barnes, his face a mask of furious desperation, grabbed Mac, pulling him aside. "What the hell are you doing, Mac?" Barnes hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "This is our unit. You just witnessed what you didn't see. Get it?" The implication was clear. Silence, or suffer the consequences. Mac looked at the dead civilian, then at his own men. Their faces a mix of defiance and complicity. He knew he couldn't unsee what he had just witnessed. He knew he couldn't be silent. NNTHAT night, back at the relative safety of the base, Mac found himself in an agonizing moral wilderness. The ghost of the dead civilian, the cold, murderous rage in Stephen's eyes, the chilling complicity of Barnes. It all screamed for justice. He knew the risk. Reporting a war crime committed by his own unit meant turning against his comrades, inviting their hatred, facing a court-martial for disloyalty, and potentially putting his own life in danger from men who might seek revenge. He could stay silent, keep his head down, and finish his tour. No one would ever know. But then he remembered his father's words about honor, his oath, and the faces of the children in the village. He picked up a pen, his hand trembling, and began to write a detailed, damning report, knowing that with every word he was shattering his own military career and risking everything he had ever held. Dear NMAC presented his report to Major Evans, a senior investigating officer from another unit. Evans, a stern, by-the-book officer, listened with a mixture of disbelief and barely concealed irritation. Accusations of war crimes against American soldiers were messy, politically inconvenient, and bad for morale. "Sergeant," Evans said, his voice cold. "Are you certain about these claims? This is a serious accusation against decorated men. Your word against theirs. This could ruin your career." Mac looked him dead in the eye. "Sir, I saw what I saw. And I can't live with myself if I don't report it." Despite the quiet threats, the subtle pressure to recant, Mac stood firm. He had chosen his path, and there was no turning back. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Mac became an instant pariah. His own unit, the men he had led and protected, now saw him as a traitor, a snitch, a danger to their unspoken code. He was subjected to the silent treatment. His locker was vandalized, and he received anonymous threats. He was deliberately isolated, given increasingly dangerous and isolated patrols. A chilling message that his life was now expendable. Some even whispered about accidents that could happen in the jungle. The psychological toll was immense. He was alone, surrounded by men who hated him, haunted by the atrocities he had witnessed, and living in constant fear. But his moral compass, though battered, remained unyielding. He had traded the camaraderie of his unit for the integrity of his soul. The military investigation was slow, agonizing, and riddled with resistance. Lieutenant Barnes and Private Stevens vehemently denied Mac's allegations, painting him as a disgruntled soldier, a liar, or a coward who had cracked under pressure. It was Mac's word against theirs, and the system was naturally inclined to protect its own. But Mac's report was too detailed, too meticulously documented. And as the investigation dragged on, independent evidence began to surface. Grainy photographs taken by a recon unit nearby, hushed testimonies from other horrified civilians, forensic analysis of the scene. Slowly, painfully, the carefully constructed wall of lies and denial began to crumble. The truth, ugly and inconvenient, was finally being unearthed. In the end, after months of agonizing testimony and political maneuvering, justice, though imperfect, was served. Lieutenant Barnes and Private Stevens were found guilty of war crimes. Their sentences, perhaps not as harsh as many wished, still sent a clear, undeniable message. Mac himself was not celebrated. There were no medals, no parades. His military career was, as he expected, over. He received an honorable discharge, but the silence that followed him was heavy, a constant reminder of the price he had paid. He walked out of that courtroom a solitary figure. Not a hero to the institution, but a man whose moral integrity remained intact, a testament to the power of a single conscience against the might of a flawed system. And Sergeant Michael McCarter's story is not about glorious victories or heroic charges. It is about the quiet, agonizing courage it takes to stand alone against the tide, to challenge the very foundations of your loyalty when those foundations become morally corrupt. He risked everything, his life, his career, his brotherhood, not for personal gain, but for the unwavering belief in human dignity and the sanctity of life. His actions, though largely uncelebrated by the military establishment he served, stand as a timeless reminder that true honor is not always found in following orders, but sometimes in having the profound courage to defy them. He teaches us that even in the darkest hours of war, the light of human conscience can never be truly extinguished. Thank you for watching The Historic State. If this incredibly powerful story of moral courage and unwavering integrity moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because here we believe that history's greatest heroes are often the ones who dared to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost.